Hello everyone and welcome to another exciting episode of Nintendo Everything Refresh, the official podcast of NintendoEverything.com, hosted this morning, well, we're recording in the morning, I don't know when you're listening, but hosted today by myself. We've also got Luiz Estrella here today.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be back here. This is my first episode for the year, so pretty happy to be here again.
Yay! Oh my gosh, that's right. Happy New Year, Luiz.
Yeah, Happy New Year, guys.
Happy New Year.
And we've also got Nicolas today.
Hello everyone.
Nicolas, we already wished you a Happy New Year, but I hope you're having a great
I don't get a second?
So far.
It's been a while since the year started.
Yes. It kind of has. It feels like it's already been a month, and it hasn't been quite that long, but what is time? Time is just a blur at this point.
Time is relative.
Yeah. I hope everyone is having a good week. We are getting into the. I don't. It used to be that there was like a slow season and a busy season, but nowadays it feels like the slow season for game releases is just like a couple weeks in December, and that's about it. It feels like the rest of the year is kind of like a whirlwind. But it's a little bit slower right now, which is good, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm still trying to play through some of the games I started over the holidays. I'm like desperately trying to finish them before February comes along.
Yeah, same here. I'm trying to finish all the games that I have before the release of Fire Emblem Engage, which is pretty close.
Yeah, less than a week as of the time of this recording. So yeah, that's going to be a huge time sink for a lot of people. I don't think I'm going to have time to squeeze it in. I think I've mentioned this before, but pretty much my only priority gaming-wise in February is the new Harry Potter game that's coming to everything
I
except
forgot
for the
about the
Switch.
one. Yeah.
Right?
That would be troublesome for me. A lot of games.
Yeah, it's really all sneaking up on me for sure. But there's another big game coming out in February, and we're going to start off today's show talking about that. We haven't talked about it too much on the show since it was originally announced, and that game is Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, the somewhat surprising port, I think, for myself at least, of Kirby's Return to Dreamland. I'm still really curious why they're bringing this particular Kirby game over. It just seems like kind of an odd choice, but I'm really excited for it because I have never played this one. And
oh, really?
Yeah, there's a lot of Kirby games I haven't played. I like Kirby, but he's not like, in the upper echelon of games that growing up with Nintendo, we always had certain games around the house, and I had Kirby Superstar on my DS, like the enhanced version of that. But that was most of my Kirby, history for quite a long time. So it's exciting to go back and see this game that also came out around that time that I totally missed. But we're starting to get a slower kind of trickle of news about this game, and it's strange to me that they're adding features to this old Wii game. I mean, it's great, but it feels so random. So I guess one of the new things, they're adding something called Samurai Kirby 100. First of all, have you guys played this Return to Dreamland Deluxe game? No, not the Deluxe.
Well, I played the original.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I mean, yeah.
I had the original on the Wii. I never finished it, but it was the first Kirby game that I actually bought. So yeah, it was my first experience with the franchise.
Yeah, I could see that being the case for a lot of people around our age. People either probably did play it as a kid or probably missed them. So was this Samurai Kirby minigame? Maybe you guys could help me become familiar. Is this something that was in the original release?
As far as I remember, no. I think the original had 3 minigames, actually. It had the Ninja Star throwing one, it had the, sort of bumper cars one, and it had a third one that I'm not currently remembering, but this game, this remaster, I guess, is adding in a whole bunch of new minigames. And some that are returning minigames from other Kirby games. Like, I think Samurai Kirby was from Superstar initially.
Yeah, okay, that sounds about right. So this is interesting because back when it was just a few years ago, Nintendo was putting out all these 100-player massive, online games or 99, I should say, Tetris 99. They did the Super Mario.
Pac-Man.
Yeah. So they've been doing that for a while, and then they kind of stopped, and I totally forgot it was a thing until this last week they announced Samurai Kirby 100, which will let you play the Samurai Kirby minigame in Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe against 99 other players. So, yeah, that's certainly unexpected.
Yeah, I think
it looks fun.
overall, I just like to see it. I think because here's the thing, I'm not that big of a 2D Kirby fan. Like, this was the first one that I played and I never finished because, to be honest, I found the game to be a little bit boring. I don't know if it was me, if I was expecting something different. I don't know what exactly happened, but Return to Dreamland was not that fantastic experience or something like that to me. So I found this a little bit of an odd choice to make a remake of, but in general, I just like to see how much attention HAL Laboratory is giving to Kirby these days. It feels like we are receiving there's always a new Kirby game to look forward to, even if it is a big game like Forgotten Lands, or if it is a small game like the Buffet one that we received recently, and now this remaster. I just like to see the attention that they're giving to the character. And something that I wanted to point out is just the art style on this remaster, because it is a little odd how they try to add these outlines on the characters. And at first I was not 100% sure, but now watching all the gameplay that has came out, I'm actually enjoying the new art style, because I think it feels a little bit different from the classic Kirby 2D art style that we are seeing now since Return to Dreamland and all the 3DS games, Two Star Allies. They all felt a little bit similar. So seeing that more cartoonish look right now that we are seeing with this one, I'm really enjoying it. I don't think I'll buy it again because, as I said, I didn't actually enjoy a lot the Wii version. But I'm happy for all the Kirby fans out there. I think they are receiving a lot of great content.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally they're obviously adding some new features to this game. But yeah, if you've played the original, I think it might be a bit of a harder sell. And I totally understand, if you do play a lot of Kirby games. I mean, there are certainly some of the side-scrolling Kirby games that are more experimental and add some pretty big shakeups, like Planet Robobot. But some are less, some are played a little bit safer. And I think that was one of the big complaints about Kirby Star Allies, the Switch's 2D Kirby game that came out closer to its launch. So, it'll be interesting, since that game has been out for a while, to see if this game kind of suffers from some of the same complaints. But I don't think it will. I think people will, there's probably a whole new segment of Kirby fans out there now in the wake of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. So it makes sense that they're putting this out. And yeah, I think compared to the 3DS, when we were getting Kirby games, felt like every couple months. I'm sure it wasn't quite that often, but we weren't really getting that same saturation on the Switch for a while, but that seems to be changing. It seems like we're certainly getting into this cadence of multiple Kirby games per year.
Global Kirby saturation.
Yeah, maybe not the worst thing. There are worse things the world could be saturated with.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So on top of the new mini games, and they've shown off some other ones. They've shown off some other sub games, which you can play with 4 players, obviously.
Yeah.
But
I do want to point out, we're going from 3 sub games in the original game to 10, which is kind of wild to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Now that you mention that, I can't remember a time that they've ever really done something like this. I mean, I know they remastered Kirby's Epic Yarn for the 3DS, but I think that was a pretty straight port. I don't think they added too much to that. So
yeah,
I think they just had some weird hat abilities.
Yeah. Well, part of it could just be because this is on the Switch and they want to have some level of expanded multiplayer functionality for folks. But I feel like maybe that would have been more of a selling point closer to the Switch's launch as opposed to now. I think people aren't as up in arms about, every game needs to have detachable Joy-Con, multiplayer games. So yeah, and so in addition to all these new mini games, which I think will be a lot of fun, there's also some new copy abilities that I should say some are new and some they're bringing back. So the two that we learned about this past week is the sand copy ability, which lets Kirby kind of shift into different shapes made out of sand, including a sand castle. So I will be excited to turn Kirby into something else ridiculous. And we also have one that's being brought back from Kirby's Star Allies, which is called the Festival copy ability, which I guess lets Kirby do a little dance.
We do love Kirby's little dances.
Yeah, no problems with that.
No problems with that whatsoever.
And I think in the reveal trailer, it was also shown that there was a mecha copy ability, which kind of turns Roby into like a robot.
Is that a new one on the series?
Yes, that's a new one. That was not in the original.
That looks awesome.
And I think those are the 3 abilities that they're adding in compared to the base game. So presumably, we're probably not going to get any new content in terms of like levels or bosses or worlds or whatever. It's going to be played pretty straight aside from these 3 new elements. That's
what it seems like. But I think there is enough time for them to keep throwing these little tweaks in here. I really just wonder why. It seems so strange to me, this whole kind of package. But I'm definitely planning on checking it out. I'm excited for it. It's been a while since I've dug deep into a 2D Kirby game. And of course they had to put it in like the busiest month of the first half of this year, but I'm gonna try and make time for it nonetheless.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
It's competing with Octopath for me.
Yeah.
Overall, I think this is an easier one to fit, because it's not like a big JRPG or anything like that. Because recently it feels that all games coming out are like those massive experiences. So at least Kirby is more of a cozy game to play when you just want to relax or something like that.
Yeah. I'll probably pick it up as well. It's just like you. I haven't played it since the original came out, but I really want to re-experience it at this point. I'm in the mood for some more Kirby action, and I'll also probably be able to play it in local co-op with a friend for the first time, and that's something I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think overall it's just like I think Nintendo just want to have a nice 2D Kirby on the Switch, because not a lot of fans were happy with Star Allies, so this is remastering this one is a guarantee that it's a game that the fans enjoyed at the first time, so they'll be happy to play it again.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I can't remember who it was, but I was watching a YouTube video and someone said, I went back and I revisited Kirby Star Allies recently, and it's a little slow at times and it's a little predictable, but it's not as bad as everyone made it out to be. And that did kind of make me curious. I was like, I don't know, do you think maybe folks were too hard on that game originally just because, it was kind of at that point when the Switch had come out where we were still just hungry for everything to get on the Switch and everything, we wanted it all to be perfect and masterpieces, and I don't know. I am kind of curious. I only ever played the demo for Star Allies.
Yeah, I think it was probably Star Allies' reaction was probably partly the fact that it was being very formulaic at that point in an era where a lot of other franchises were, branching out with Breath of the Wild and Odyssey.
Yeah.
Being the 2 main examples. And that kind of... It's also the fact that Star Allies, even on its own, was kind of basic. It compared to other 2D Kirby games, it just wasn't... The levels were not quite as interesting, and the gimmick didn't feel as fleshed out, at least initially. Mm-hmm. So that combined with the fact that it kind of was just more of the same in an era where we were getting a lot of new things, I think it was probably a bit overblown, but it's also understandable why that was the sentiment at the time. Now that we have Forgotten Land that's come out and we're seeing that the devs are going to innovate and have innovated, the fact that we're getting basically a return to form in a way with this remaster, I don't think is going to rub people the wrong way as much.
Yeah. I think looking back, let's not forget that Star Allies was the technically the one to be the sequel to Planet Robobot, which was a very well received game, and I think fans were expecting an evolution of that, and Star Allies felt like it was going in a different direction, and people were not super happy. I think something really similar happened to Yoshi's Crafted World that came at a similar time, and I think people, after Woolly World, people were expecting something a little more developed, and Crafted World follow a different path.
Which totally worked out for that game. I mean, I know people kind of balked at the price tag for a game of that length. It was a pretty short game. But in terms of overall quality, yeah, you can't deny that. Yoshi's Crafted World just really, I think, impressed a lot of folks.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the game. I think it's really fun.
Yeah. Well, if you're interested in Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, that game is coming out February 24th, and I hope you all can make time for it. But we're not quite done talking about Kirby yet. Gosh, I love that Sakurai is putting out all these retrospective videos in his semi-retired state.
Yes.
We get to learn so much about these games that he worked on.
I want him to take up Twitch streaming next.
He's gonna have to do something once he's done. No, he should just go enjoy his retirement if that's what he wants. But yes, I would love to see Sakurai become a streamer. That'd be great. Anyways, his latest video was based on Kirby Air Ride, which was Kirby's big GameCube exclusive racing game. And he went pretty deep into, why they made it and the things they were trying to do when they were in the development process. I think the big thing that was crazy to me that you just never see happening nowadays was that they made this game in about 4 months to try and tie in with the release of the Kirby TV show, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's not something you can do with just modern dev times.
I was trying to think, what game nowadays would be made in 4 months? And honestly, I don't even think, licensed games. There used to be a point in the past where we had so many licensed games for, kids' TV shows and books and stuff like that. I could see some of those being cranked up, in an expedited time frame, but nowadays, I don't think you see any game made in that length.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because Sakurai says in the video that he specifically decided to make a racing game because he knew it would be easier to make in a small time, right? So he actually knowing that he would have not a lot of time, he tried to make the best that he could. But just something interesting to point out, he also mentions that this 5 or 6 months was he basically, because first they tried to make an approach and it didn't work, and then after that with 5 or 6 months he built the whole game, but he had some assets or stuff like that, but mechanically he created the whole game in 5 or 6 months, which is of course impressive.
It's pretty shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, shoot, he also mentioned that there was supposed to be, I totally forgot about it, but there was supposed to be a
GameCube
Kirby experience on the GameCube, and we just never got it. So for a lot of folks, this kind of ended up being it, So
yeah, I mean, at least back then we were getting a bunch of handheld Kirby games, but it was kind of, I think this was the first home console that did not have a Kirby game on, or a traditional 2D action Kirby game on it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
I wonder if this would be the first real 3D Kirby game before Forgotten Lands.
I mean, technically, yeah.
It's a good point. Yeah, it's certainly not a Kirby game in many traditional ways, but yeah. I feel like something like Kirby and the Forgotten Land that had to have been, experimented with and prototyped with for a long time. I have to imagine that the reason why we didn't get a big 3D Kirby game like that earlier was just because they didn't feel like they could do it to a level that was satisfactory for them. But
True.
I don't know, maybe the technology just finally caught up with their vision. I feel like that happens in a lot of cases. Yeah.
You don't think they were making a Metroid Prime Kirby 3D experience for the GameCube?
Oh my god.
First person Kirby shooter?
Imagine
The weird thing is that this could work.
Yeah, right? Like, you suck up the abilities. A lot of them are long range anyways, like, theoretically.
This is a fantastic idea. I'm actually picturing something that's like very fast paced along the lines of like Doom. You're just like everyone just completely just like flying over these big open maps and just shooting out enemies at each other. And that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you could even make it a battle royale.
There you go. Well, we're already getting that in Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, Nicholas. So.
Battle Royale 2.
Yeah, kinda.
There you go. Yes. All right. Well, as much as I was about to say that's enough Kirby, but I don't think there's ever such thing as enough Kirby. But we got to move on to our next topic, and this one was also a pretty big surprise to me. So, we got some news from Ubisoft in this past week. Ubisoft had a big meeting with a lot of their investors, and a couple things happened, not specifically related to the Switch, but I'll mention them anyways. First of all, if you're following the game Skull and Bones, that one got delayed again, which I don't think that game, it may not ever come out. They also said that, they've just really been struggling financially, and so they canceled 3 unannounced projects. We don't know if any of them would have been on the Switch. We don't really know what any of them were. But yeah, that was a pretty big surprise. They're really, they said they've just very much underperformed financially in the past year. And I can see that. They didn't really put out too much. Their output has certainly decreased over the years. But I think the biggest surprise on this whole call was they said that Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, which came out in late October, they said that game really underperformed and that it really surprised them. And they were saying that kind of contributed to, their overall struggles that they're facing right now.
Yeah, that just seems so odd, right? Because when the original Mario plus Rabbids came out, there was a lot of doubt about it, but it ended up winning people over once it released. And I don't think I heard much negative press about this game before it released either. It was mostly just people looking forward to it. So I don't know if maybe did they just set their expectations too high? Did they pull a Square Enix? What happened here?
Yeah, it's possible. It's hard to imagine a game with Mario in it not selling particularly well, but it's not the strangest thing ever. I mean, it did happen. I mean, Alpha Dream, they went bankrupt because their Mario and Luigi RPGs stopped selling. So it's not a totally impossible, but yeah, I mean, this game, I feel like it got a good amount of marketing. I mean, it was in Nintendo Directs. I was getting YouTube ads for it, before and after it came out.
Yeah, and the original game sold 7.5 million copies, I think is the last reported number. So I have a hard, did they just... what were their expectations for this? Because I feel like this game would have sold a lot too, based on that.
To be honest, this number of around 7 millions, it was a long time before release, and this game was found on the eShop for stuff like $10 or something like that for a long time after release. I think it's really complicated, right? Because the first one got a lot of attention just because it was a super strange and weird idea to get together the Rabbids and Mario and make a strategy game out of it. So I think a lot of people had a lot of curiosity, and the game caught a lot of attention just because of the whole concept. But seeing the second one was a game with a bigger budget, a game that wanted to be taken a little more serious, and I think the developers were really hoping that this would be a great success. But overall, I think for a number of reasons, people were not as interested in the sequel as in the first one, because it was not anything new anymore. We already knew the idea of Mario and Rabbids getting together. It still is a strategic JRPG, which we know is not a super appealing genre of video games. So a lot of people were not that interested just seeing the trailer and stuff like that. So at the end, beyond that, we had a lot of other releases close to this game. At the end of the past year, I think we had Pokemon Scarlet Violet, Bayonetta 3, and even before that, we had some big games coming out like Xenoblade 3 and other Nintendo releases that I think kind of made people wait a little bit to buy this one. And there's also the fact that Ubisoft is known to make those big sales, right? So people like me, I'm still waiting for the game to get at a more reasonable price.
That was something I was thinking about, because it's the same thing in my case. I haven't picked up the game because I know that in like 2 months it's going to be half off, probably with the DLC included.
Oh,
yeah.
So like that makes me wonder how well that marketing strategy works for Ubisoft in general. If that's part of why, if they just manage to make up those sales later on, once they have, the game goes on sale for like half off regularly, it starts getting more of an install base, but it just kind of lags behind the first few months because of that.
True.
Yeah, with the original Mario plus Rabbids, I didn't pick it up right away. I picked it up on sale, and yeah, I could see with how many games came out in that window, people's budgets were already stretched a little thin, and everyone was talking about God of War during that time. Like that was pretty much that and Bayonetta that I felt like people were talking about the most. So I can see how this one got lost in the shuffle. It is a shame because I loved this game and I really want people to experience how I mean, yes, it is a strategy game, but it feels more at times like it plays out like an action game. Like I feel like even though you do have to be very strategic and it is turn-based, just the overall pace and flow of it all, it feels very fast and very modern.
I can see that. And yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think they probably did that in hopes that, we want to reach more people. We want this game to have more widespread appeal. And I feel like they could have gotten it, but yeah, I don't know. I do think people will pick it up eventually, but yeah. Everyone I've
ruin the
talked
chances
to who's
of getting
played it has
more.
enjoyed it.
Yeah,
hopefully it doesn't
same.
ruin the chances of getting more games like this in the future.
I was thinking about the same thing. Because to be honest, that whole presentation that Ubisoft made, it felt really like they are in a really bad position right now. And I think Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope was basically the biggest game that they released last year, if I'm not mistaken. We did not have Assassin's Creed, Skull and Bones, or anything like that.
Yeah, I think they just had Assassin's Creed DLC, right?
Yeah. So I think this was the game
defense,
to actually to make the year for them, and it was a huge disappointment in that sense. Maybe they put all their expectations on this game.
Yeah, I mean, in their defense, like that Assassin's Creed DLC was pretty much a whole new campaign for the game, so it's fairly substantial.
Oh, I see.
And they do have multiple projects scheduled to come out this year that are deep into development. They've got a big Assassin's Creed game coming out. They've got a new Avatar first-person game coming out. They have a bunch of mobile projects in the works, which I can't really get excited for. But yeah,
I just hope that those big games will come out in a playable state, because sometimes with Ubisoft we never know exactly how the game will come out. But I think if those games that they are producing for a long time now, they release in a nice state, maybe they can be saved.
Yeah. The main thing I'm concerned about is the fact they mentioned in that report that the industry continues to shift towards mega brands and everlasting live games and whatnot, and obviously that's not really what Sparks of Hope is, unless you count it getting DLC as it being a live game, which is probably not the definition they're really, following. And I would rather that games like this that are, pretty much complete packages and getting some DLC add-ons don't just... If we do get a sequel, another game in the Mario plus Rabbids series, I don't want it to have a whole bunch of microtransactions, basically.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Same.
Yeah, and man, they used to do so much more. I mean, if you guys remember back to like the 2010s, around that time, first of all, they were publishing Splinter Cell games. They were publishing all like Prince of Persia games. They were doing all kinds of stuff that they just don't do anymore.
Yeah. Rayman Origins too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Rayman, yeah. They were putting out indies. They put out, I don't know if you guys ever played From
Child of Light.
Dust. Yeah, Child of Light. I mean, so many cool experiments. They were putting out Driver games, and we don't get any of that nowadays. And it's such a shame because they have so many good IP, including some that I think even if they were just to port some of their back catalog to the Switch, people would be over the moon to have some of these games. And I don't know what's going on over there.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I mean, hopefully they figure things out, because at the end of the day, like, yeah, there's the games that we all want and are concerned about, but the people who work there, I mean, they employ a massive amount of people, and I'm sure no one is happy to see all these projects get canceled and delayed and all that. So, hoping for the best for everyone.
A friend of mine was suggesting that maybe Microsoft is looking into them, but at this point, I don't know.
I think Microsoft has enough things on their plate right now, to be honest.
Yeah, if anything, I think if their whole Activision Blizzard merger does not go through, maybe that'll be a case for these companies slowing down. You know, maybe there will be fewer of these big mergers.
True.
We'll have to see how that plays out. Hopefully, we'll get a conclusion to that story sometime this year. Because I don't know if you guys remember, but that could result in some more Switch games, surprisingly, if Microsoft buys Activision Blizzard, which is crazy to think about.
It's funny how even Switch is in this situation, even if indirectly.
What a world we live in. One other thing, this story just came out just before this episode, so I just wanted to mention it really quick. They did say that originally with Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, they originally kind of stuck with the grid system, like the traditional grid-based combat. It was only around 2019 that they decided to break it and let you have direct control over the characters. And I'm really glad they took that risk, because I feel like that's a huge reason why this game feels so ambitious, and not just for, you know, a Mario game, but really for the whole strategy genre, doing something different.
Yeah, I think that was basically the selling point from a gameplay point of view. I think it was like one of the things that I looked at this game, I felt, okay, they are trying something really different from the previous one. So I really want to play that game just to see how it actually works, because seeing videos, I'm like, does this actually works? Because it feels like without the grids, you don't have so many rules, and it feels like the strategy will not work. But hearing from people that play the game, it feels like it actually works. So I'm curious to see it while playing it.
Yeah, totally. All right, let's move on, because we've got still quite a bit to talk about. So this would not normally be a notable story. We get a lot of different third-party controllers for the Switch, and most of them are not particularly notable. But this one in particular turned some heads this week. So this controller is called the Nixie Wizard. I hope I said that right, Nixie. And I'm not convinced that it's not breaking some kind of copyright law, because it looks almost exactly like a GameCube controller. But it works like a Joy-Con, so you can actually detach both halves of it and connect it to your Switch. Which I could see being very great for, you know, Smash players and things like that.
You see, Nick, it's both a GameCube controller and Joy-Cons, so it breaks two copyrights and they cancel out.
There you go. Well, I don't think Nintendo has a problem with people making third-party controllers for the Switch, although normally they have to be licensed in some capacity, was my understanding.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know if they're...
Yeah, there's a number of Chinese controllers that I'm pretty sure Nintendo didn't license.
It's all above board. No one's getting hurt, you know. So in addition to the fact that this is a GameCube-style controller, and in addition to the fact that it can connect to your Switch like the Joy-Cons, the other big unique thing is with its joysticks. They're saying that these joysticks will not drift, because they never actually physically touch anything. So, hey, that's a selling point for many.
That's a bold statement. Yeah,
it is a bold
statement.
The thing
is, like, I feel like obviously the Joy-Cons have a problem. I don't know if the new ones they've made still do, because I feel like I've been hearing less reports about that. But regardless, the Pro controllers don't really have that issue as well. Like, they can drift, but I don't think any more than like your average controller can. So, in that regard, I don't know how necessary a drift-proof controller is from that angle. It is still kind of funny to see, though.
Yeah,
but if you're a handheld player, you know,
Pro
controllers are going to do you much good.
True. I think we heard stories from Drift even on the PS5, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe that's funnily enough, I had Drift problems with my first Pro controller. It wasn't as frequent as it was with the Joy-Con. It was pretty rare, but sometimes it happened. So yeah, after a while, I bought a second one. Now the thing with this particular controller is that it looks pretty similar with the Wavebirds GameCube controller, which was the Wi-Fi controller from the GameCube. So it's funny to see how similar the design actually is. It feels to me as if it is the Nintendo version of the Xbox Elite controller, that controller that has so many options and you can change the analog stick and stuff like that. So it feels to me like this Elite option to people who play on Switch.
Yeah, it's yeah, I always have a hard time. I'm not really the type of person to buy like third-party accessories for my hardware usually. Like I'd always rather have the official stuff because in the past it used to be the most reliable option. But that's just not always the case with the Switch, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I will say to your point, Luiz, the Joy-Cons that I got with my Switch OLED about a year and a half ago, those ones have not drifted on me. So maybe they have improved their manufacturing a little bit. It just feels like the damage has already been done,
Yeah, I got Skyward Sword Joy-Cons, I guess that would have been, 2 years ago roughly? Or a year and a half ago? And those have not drifted for me either. I do think they changed some part inside of it to help reduce the amount of drifting they do.
Yeah, I think something like that was actually confirmed. I'm not sure if it was on the Switch V2 or on the OLEDs or something like that, but they actually changed.
If I remember correctly, it was something as insignificant as like they just added a little piece of foam or something like that.
I heard something like that.
Yeah, it was a shame though, because for a while
technology
we were getting. Yeah, well, and can you imagine like if you got like these like limited edition collectible Joy-Cons with your Switch that you can't buy in stores, and then they start drifting after a month. Like, oh, that was so frustrating.
Yeah, I had I think 2 pairs of Joy-Cons that I bought right at the beginning in 2017, and both of them had some terrible issues with drifting controls. I think Nintendo tried to hide this issue until the point that was impossible to hide, because I think they tried to avoid lawyers and people trying to get more money from them and stuff like that. I think they didn't want to actually change the patents of the Joy-Con, because if they changed something like that, they would be admitting that a widespread issue was actually happening. So maybe that's why they took so long to solve this.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I did have a little. It was I'll call it a scare the other day when I was on the home menu of my Switch, and I couldn't control the joysticks. Like it just kept going to the right, and I was like, oh no, what's going on? But I reset my Switch, I turned it off and turned it back on, and then it was totally fine, and it hasn't happened since. So
awesome.
Never seen that glitch before, but yeah,
exciting.
But you brought up another good point, Luiz, in that like this we don't really have. I mean, we have the Pro controller for the Switch, but I think that even is just more like a fairly standard controller, all things considered. We don't really have like an elite controller like how Xbox and PlayStation have been doing. But I don't really think the market would be there for that for the Switch. I can't imagine folks spending $200+ on Switch controllers.
Yeah, true. I mean, when you consider that a Switch unit itself is going to be $350 at most for an OLED, selling over half of that on a controller.
And to be honest, the only thing that I miss on the Joy-Cons and the Pro Controller and all the other consoles have is the 2 triggers being analog, like the ZR and the ZL. I think it's something that I actually miss a little in mostly on racing games. On racing simulator is pretty obvious, but in general I think it's just a nice option. And Nintendo actually created this on the GameCube. It was the first company to actually do that. So it's funny to see that they are not going back to this.
Right. Yeah. I always wonder if decisions like that actually resulted in us getting fewer racing games, fewer shooters because of the lack of analog triggers. But anyways, I just thought this was a cool controller to shout out, and yeah, this isn't a commercial or anything. It looks interesting, and they're doing what Nintendo isn't. Now all we need is GameCube games on Switch Online to actually play it with.
Oh, please.
I mean, do consider, if we get GameCube games on Switch Online, they're probably going to give us, like, wireless, or I don't know if they're also wired GameCube controllers, like we've gotten for the NES, SNES, and N64.
Yeah, I can only hope.
That would be cool.
And let's not forget about what I was just talking. They will also have to give us solutions to games that use the analog triggers.
Yeah.
With Mario Sunshine, they gave the solution of you have, I think, 2 buttons. The one where he's not splashing so much water, and the one which is full water. But games like Metroid Prime, I think there are a lot of other games on the GameCube that use the analog triggers.
It's true. Maybe that's why they haven't done it yet. I mean, that would be a really strange reason, but I don't know, man. Nintendo makes strange decisions. I can see that.
True.
Logic checking out. Yeah. All right, well, let's take a break from talking about hardware, and let's talk about some more games. I wanted to shout out this one because I'm very excited for it. We just asked for a review copy. This game is called Rhythm Sprout, and this is just a super charming rhythm game. You play as what looks like a little vegetable, and you are tasked by the king of this vegetable world that you are now the chosen onion, and you need to go stop, and this is a real name, you need to go stop King Sugar Daddy and his army of mad sweets from invading the mighty vegetable kingdom. But it's a rhythm game, so you are kind of moving forward in this 3D environment by hitting notes successfully as they kind of come towards you. And there are enemies that'll pop up, and you have to hit rhythm notes in time to dodge or attack, and it just looks really cool. It looks really unique.
Yeah. For some reason, it gives me Harmonite vibes. I don't know why, but it's very charming.
No, I could see it. It's kind of a similar, different presentation, but similar concept in terms of movement and combat. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. We get so many indie games on Switch, but something about this one, it seems like they're putting a little bit extra into it, maybe in terms of the budget or in terms of just, I know this game has been in the works for a little while. So, yeah, rhythm games are one of those things that I can always just kind of pick up and pop into, pretty much regardless of, if I'm playing a big game or something. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, it looks pretty good.
So yeah, that one is coming out on February 1st. And it's coming to other platforms as well. But I will definitely be playing it on Switch for sure. Now, this next game is... I can't say I'm excited for it, but I wanted to bring it up because it's interesting. And the whole story behind it is wild. So there was a game called Gunscape. And it was originally planned for the Wii U, as a Wii U exclusive back in 2016 at one point.
Rest in peace, Wii U.
Yeah. Pour one out for the
Too
Wii
soon.
U. Too soon. But yeah, so there's this game called Gunscape. It was a indie developed first-person shooter that seemed like a mix between just classic Doom-style first-person shooting mixed with a very Minecraft-inspired, we'll put it that way, Minecraft-inspired aesthetic. And I guess folks were reasonably excited for it, probably because there weren't a lot of notable games coming to the Wii U at that point. But yeah, that game was supposed to come out in 2016, and then it didn't, and then they said it might come to Switch, and now here we are in 2023 getting this game coming to the Switch.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the story is pretty interesting, but I think for people who enjoy shooters like Doom and those classic shooters, having the possibility to actually create the levels and play with friends seems to be like a really fun experience. It's not my type of game, but I can see people getting excited for that. Yeah,
no, I should mention that. That's a good point. Yeah, I don't think I mentioned. Yeah, so you actually can build your own levels in this game, like as you would like in Minecraft's creative mode.
It's very similar to Minecraft.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned Minecraft. I thought you mentioned that aspect. But yeah, it's pretty similar.
It definitely
Yeah.
seems like the main selling point. I don't know how much the gameplay will differentiate itself from those old first-person shooters, but the fact that there are apparently such free and open creation tools that I think are even multiplayer, that definitely seems like something that a few people will latch onto very hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could totally see it. I think, at least for me personally, I feel like we've gotten so many games done in this style now that I'm just kind of over it personally, you know?
True.
Like, I'd rather
It-
see
it-
something original, but yeah.
Voxels, Nick, voxels.
I know.
It's funny that you mentioned, Nick, about with the Wii U era, how we would get excited with any game basically that was announced because we didn't had a lot of games. I remember
It's true.
I remember when a game called Devil 30 was announced for the Wii U, and it was like this realistic game.
Oh,
with
God,
shooting
yeah.
mechanics. And I remember getting excited for it, but it was not my type of game. It was just because it was the only thing coming at the time. So I was excited for it, and the game was terrible when it actually came out.
Yeah, Devil's
So
Third had
I
a
think
few
right now we
problems.
live in such a different where we are actually saturated with so many games coming out.
Wasn't there also like a Platinum developed multiplayer like temple exploring game?
I think
They
it wasn't
announced-
Platinum. It was
It wasn't Platinum.
from the
Chain Ninja?
creators of Tekken, wasn't?
It was Lost
Maybe.
Reavers. It was a Square Enix
Yes,
game.
that's what it was.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah,
was
I never got
like
the chance
featured
to
in
play that.
directs and everything
Yes.
and spotlighted, and it was just not good.
Yeah, it's totally bombed. Yeah. Yeah, but it was... what a weird time that was. Companies
True,
were
true,
experimenting and we were getting all these weird little experiments, but yeah. So anyways, if you're interested in Gunscape, that game is coming out on the Switch relatively soon, February 1st. So add it to the pile of February games. Good luck to you all. All right, I just wanted to give some quick updates before we talk about recent releases. So first of all, we got a big update for Bayonetta 3. This was mostly a patch in the sense that they're fixing some bugs and they're also making some adjustments to combat. So now, full disclaimer, I have not played Bayonetta 3 yet, so I don't know how substantial these changes are, but it sounds like they're making some pretty big ones. They're adjusting like the timing for like blocking for Viola's character. They're like reworking the difficulty in some stages, which I don't really know if it's a spoiler or not, so I'm not going to mention it here. But yeah, it's good to see. Did people complain about the difficulty and like the combat rhythm in Bayonetta 3?
To an extent, the main thing with Viola is her witch time mechanic, where time slows down, is tied to her blocking rather than dodging, and they just made the witch time activation timing on her block extremely strict, where you really had to learn how to do it properly, and if you were off by just a fraction of a second, the witch time was like half a second long. It was way stricter than Bayonetta's, and because of the fact that it was just different gameplay in general with a new character, it made the character pretty difficult to pick up. You just had to really adapt to what was happening, and I think this is probably a good thing. It just seems they're making it so much more lenient in terms of the activation window for the witch time and even just the length of it. I haven't had the time to try it out personally, but I think it's something that was kind of needed, if nothing else, to just let people kind of ease themselves into the game a bit better and not completely bounce off of Viola's gameplay.
Right.
Other than that, I think there's a lot of changes that are just kind of more quality of life. Certain weapons couldn't do certain things that other weapons could because they had different actions on like holding a button down, and those are being fixed. The stages you mentioned, those are mostly every main stage has a bunch of like side bonus levels that you do. And those are the things that they're kind of adjusting the conditions for to make a few of them easier that I guess people had complained about.
Gotcha.
The main thing for me is there's one random change in the bug fixes where they talk about an attack from the Kraken demon that had abnormally high attack power, and that one makes me sad because it was a bug that made it so you could basically one-shot bosses in like 10 seconds because it was just a completely busted mechanic, and it was very fun.
Yeah. Well, no, it's look, I love that they're updating this game and taking some of this feedback. It's kind of funny because the other game that we finally got news about for an update was Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and that update isn't coming until February. So Bayonetta team is out here showing up Game Freak and getting on some of these things. But yeah, no, it's for something like this, with these types of games, having balanced combat and making sure that the pacing and the timing of things is on point is like really crucial to having that feel. And we've seen other games get really kind of like torn apart for not nailing some of the fundamentals. So I'm glad they're going back and fixing some of these things.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised it's such a comprehensive update in terms of, because bug fixes are understandable, but the fact they're adjusting balance for so many things is very surprising. Right. But I really appreciate it. It shows that they do care.
It's always nice because even if you keep developing a game for who knows how long, 20 years, when the game actually arrives at the hands of the players, new issues will probably appear. So it's nice that they're taking the feedback and making some balances here and there. About what you mentioned, Nick, about the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet being only in February, I think Game Freak has a lot of more stuff to fix. So I'm actually... I'm not going to say happy, but it makes sense that it's going to take a while for the update to come out, and I hope it fixes a lot of the issues.
Yeah. The fact that it is so far away, it does kind of, it makes you hope that this is actually going to be
and the fact
a
that
really big update.
Telling us in advance, I think it's a pretty rare thing to see.
Yeah,
hopefully it's not just
would
adding
hope
functionality.
Well, that's what. That's what I'm saying. Like, I would hope that this would be a really large update that is going to substantially fix and improve the game, because the game still is broken in many ways. It feels, I don't know. There's just that part of me that's like, I'm worried they're gonna hype up this big update and they're gonna put it out, and it's just gonna fix a few things, and the game is overall gonna be in kind of a poor state. Because that kind of stuff happens all the time,
That's very possible, yeah.
So
the update is actually going to introduce several new bugs.
Oh, God.
Inevitably. I mean, yeah, that's pretty common, but I mean, I think for a franchise as big as Pokemon is, I understand that it takes time to fix things. But it just goes to show that this game probably should not have come out at the time that it did. Probably should have gotten pushed back.
Yep.
If it's taking them 3-4 months to fix these bugs,
Yep.
So, hoping for the best for all the folks still playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet out there. All right, let's shift gears for a bit and talk about recent releases. Now, this has been a bit of a slower week, not a lot of big stuff that's going to change very, very shortly, so I'm certainly not complaining about it. But some cool indies that have been getting a little bit of buzz to shout out. First one is Vengeful Guardian Moonrider. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this one, it's a side-scrolling action platformer, more so along the lines of a Metroidvania. It's a little bit of a bigger game, and it is very much a old school style experience. Like, there are plenty of games that kind of claim that, but looking at this artwork, like, this looks like ripped from an SNES.
Yeah,
it
looks like an old school beat 'em up art style.
Yeah, definitely. This one's been getting some buzz. Apparently, just beyond the art style, it's just actually a very, very good game. And it's, I think it's the kind of thing where you can look at it and be like, what you're gonna get, because we've had enough of these types of games at this point that I don't think it would be a huge surprise. But yeah, if you're up for some science fiction action with retro aesthetic, I don't think you'll be disappointed in this.
Yeah, it looks like a fantastic SNES game, you know what I mean? Like one of the best games from that era usually had that level of detail in the art style and how fast everything happens. looks. I think people who have a lot of nostalgia for that era would love something like that.
Yeah, I particularly like that it's not a side score the whole time. They show in the trailer some, well, I guess I shouldn't say that. Yeah, okay, so they do show in the trailer the kind of when you're on like a motorbike scene and you're racing forward and like shit. It looks like a boss battle.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
also
it,
very
like,
old SNES stuff. Yeah,
That's really SNES.
Totally.
That kind of art style.
Yeah, it takes a certain amount of, I think, not just nostalgia, but like appreciation for that era to make something like this because, you know, not everyone appreciates that art style and, you know, the limitations of those days. You know, having to make games with those limitations in mind was a huge challenge. And so I think people who can appreciate that and kind of embrace that, those games just really stand out to me.
True.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Vengeful Guardian Moonrider, that game is out now. Now this other one I don't know too much about. It is called Chasing Static, and it is a first-person horror game. Now they're calling it, this is another one of those kind of retro throwbacks. They're saying it's PS1 inspired, like they're trying to echo some of the notes from a PlayStation art style. I don't really see that too much personally. I mean, it looks a little blocky around the edges, I guess, but the vibe for this game is really cool. It's kind of, they're trying to give it like that 80s kind of sci-fi horror vibe. You know, you're walking around, you're using this like I don't know what you'd call it, like a audio detector thing, and you're kind of exploring these environments and using that to hunt down ghosts and supernatural anomalies, which sounds kind of cool. It's a little bit more of like a non-linear experience, it seems like. You're not just walking down corridors. It seems like it's a little more exploration focused.
Yeah, I can see the PS1 vibes. Not sure if it is bringing inspiration for something like Silent Hills. It doesn't seem to be as creepy as Silent Hills, but I think it has a very, again, kind of a nostalgic look that some people will really enjoy. The mystery vibe is definitely something that I enjoy in some games. So, yeah, if it's not... I mean, I like the mystery vibe. I don't like gore stuff or very explicit stuff. So if it doesn't have something like that, I can actually enjoy this game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I generally also prefer just like the moodier types of horror rather than stuff that just aims to like kind of gross you out, you know?
Yeah.
I was really hoping that with all the Silent Hill announcements we got last year that maybe we'd see some smaller project on the Switch, but nothing yet, unfortunately.
Well, if nothing else, it'll probably inspire other people to start making their own Silent Hill-like projects again.
True.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, and it's also, you know, I think the other reason why I have a hard time talking about games like this in detail is just because the indie horror scene is very saturated at this point, and sometimes it can be hard just from looking at some of these games to tell what exactly makes it different from the other dozen games that launched on Steam in the past week, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't say that to like minimize the work of the developer, because obviously any type of game development is very hard, and I have a lot of respect for people who are able to do it. But I think just looking at it at a glance, I'm like, well, the art style looks cool, and it looks like it's a little more exploration focused, but I'd probably have to play it to say much more about it, you know? Yeah. Well, if you're looking to get your horror fix on the Switch, Chasing Static is also out now, so go check it out. And the last game I wanted to talk about this week, in terms of cool indies, this game is called Terror of Hemosaurus, and it's basically Rampage. So, yeah, it's Rampage with pretty visuals and bloom effects and more gore, it seems like. I had to do the age rating check on the Switch's website, so there you go.
Yeah.
Very cute pixel art visuals as you topple buildings and murder a bunch of people.
Yes. Rampage is clearly the inspiration for this game, and I don't have a problem for it because I love Rampage. Did anyone ever play the Rampage game that came out on GameCube? Rampage Total Destruction.
Actually, no.
No.
Not familiar with
Okay.
the series, actually.
It's wild, man. That game is it starts off with like an energy drink commercial, and this was in the mid 2000s, mind you. So this is already just off the wall, and yeah, I don't know why I'm talking about this game right now, but anyways, I love Rampage. Luis, if you're not familiar, basically the whole premise is you control a giant monster, and your goal is to climb up buildings and pull people from their windows and eat them, and then cause enough destruction to move to the next stage. So once you've leveled all the buildings, you can move on to the next one. But eventually, like, the army and stuff shows up, so they're like shooting at you, as the army is wont to do.
That sounds a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good time. They don't really make them anymore though, so I have a feeling that's a big reason why this game exists.
Yeah.
So yeah, I might check this one out actually.
Yeah,
I've
this
been
looks kind of
playing-
fun.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So that's pretty much our show for the week. Thank you everyone for tuning in so far. But before we wrap up, we're going to quickly go over what we have all been playing in this slower season of winter. Let's start with you, Luis, since it's been a little while since we've caught up. What have you been up to lately?
So to talk about what I've been playing right now, I have to go back a bit, and I was playing at the end of last year during December. I had a small recess from my job, so I had a lot of time to play games, thankfully.
Oh, good, good.
And I spent the biggest part of my time playing Danganronpa, the first one. I
Ooh,
never played
nice.
the series. It's a visual novel series with a lot of elements of detective and stuff like that. And honestly, amazing. It's a really interesting concept of you basically every chapter of the game you have a murder and you are locked with these people in a school, so you have to investigate and to discover what has happened and do that in a trial. So it just feels so good because it actually feels it's not that difficult to guess the right answer to everything, but it feels like the player actually has an input in it. So it feels really fun. And beyond that, the actual story, the characters, they are amazing, they are great. So by the end of the last year, I finished the first one, and then I was eager to play the second one, but I knew that it would get on sale. But I wanted to play at the exact moment, but I knew it would get on sale eventually. And then I think at the beginning of January, it actually got on sale. So I got it at a very reasonable price, the second game, and I'm playing that one right now. I'm just at the beginning. I was playing it this week and last week. And it seems to be, honestly, a small evolution of the first one. It still is really similar, but there's a lot of mysteries and stuff from the overall lore and the world that I want to discover. I'm a big fan of visual novels, even though I didn't play a lot of them, so I'm happy to finally get it on this, which was one of the most famous one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's
Danganronpa's
awesome to
great.
hear. Yeah, Danganronpa, I've heard so many great things about it, and I remember when I tried playing it on my Vita originally, around the time it came out, and I think I bounced off it, and I think the thing I struggled with, and I'd be curious to hear if it feels any better on the Switch version, is when you're walking around kind of in first person in the school, I felt like that was kind of like a fairly decent chunk of the game, and so it just didn't really click with me. It just felt kind of clunky, and it kind of turned me off the game. So, like, has that bothered you at all, Luis, or have you been enjoying that part?
It is clunky. I think on the second game it's even worse on Switch because the FPS drops to something like 10 FPS, something like that.
Ooh.
But
man.
I don't think, honestly, Nick, I don't think it's that big of a part in the game, actually. Because after a certain point, I don't know if that's something that was added on the Switch, but you have fast travel. So basically, I could just travel from the place where the story would continue or to the places where I had to investigate. So I didn't spend a lot of time actually walking on the corridors without actually needing to do that, if that makes sense. But that's definitely the clunkiest part of the game. I can see what you are talking about. I think being a visual novel, it's a game that it has a slow pace at the beginning, for sure. But when you are a few chapters in, I think it grabs you more firmly. And when you start to understand that there's a lore behind and a lot of mysteries, I think it gets way more interesting.
Gotcha. Yeah, people, always rave about it. And so I feel like I deserve to give it another chance, it feels like one of those games that if you like visual novels, everyone's got to give it a fair shot. So
Yeah,
I might have to revisit that one. Yeah. Have you played that one, Nicholas?
I played through the first game. I kind of fell in love with it. It was super fun. I started the second game, but I never ended up finishing it. I think I only got through like the first or second chapter. I really do need to revisit it at some point, but at least I have them saved up in my backlog.
Yeah, well, they have the whole collection on Switch now, so you can buy.
I know, but I bought them on Steam already.
Oh yeah, okay. Well,
and I kind of want to play them on Switch because it's portable. Yeah. Well, okay. So
those are very long games. I think I finished with something around 30 hours, the first one. So it's nice to have them on Switch. I think 50% I played on portable modes probably.
Yeah, I might pick them on Switch just for that. I think there is one Danganronpa game not on Switch, which is like the shooter, like the shooter spin-off.
Yeah, I think that's the only one that's missing.
I don't know how important it is to the lore, but we have the three main ones and the summer camp ones, which from what I heard is basically just some fun service.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I've heard too. But yeah, at least, I don't know if they did this elsewhere, but at least here in the US, when the games came out, you could actually get all the Danganronpa games and that weird summer board game spin-off thing on one cartridge. So it's called the Danganronpa Decadence Collection. So that could be a good way if you're like really curious about it, just to get into the whole series. Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. What about you, Nicholas? What have you been playing this past week or so?
Honestly, I haven't had too much time to play stuff recently. I've been kind of busy this week. I did pick up Monster Train First Class on one of the New Year's sales, and I've been trying that out a bit since I had my eye on it for like a year and a half since it came out, and it's fun. Okay. It's a roguelike kind of in like a Slay the Spire style game, but it's set in a train. You've got 3 levels at a train, and you have to basically defend each level to prevent your core at the very top level from getting destroyed. So it sort of plays like a tower defense card-based roguelike. It's got a lot going on, but it feels very smooth. It runs very well on Switch, and I think if there's anyone that enjoys those kind of Slay the Spire-esque card-based roguelikes, then this is definitely a good game to check out.
Yeah, it looks, looking at some of the gameplay here, it looks surprisingly fast-paced. More so than I would think from a game that is so focused on, like, deck building and cards and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just ends up going pretty darn quickly, and it's been really fun from what I tried. I'm looking forward to playing more of it.
Yeah, it's nice to have those little occasional distractions in between all the big releases. That's kind of where I'm at this week. I picked up some games that I've been curious about for a long time. So the first one that's kind of been satisfying my puzzle fix is Luminous Remastered. This is basically, looking at it, you might assume it plays like Tetris, and it kind of does. You're dropping these falling blocks down and you're trying to clear things, but it's different in a couple ways. First of all, all the pieces are squares, and your goal is to, let me back up a little bit. All these pieces are squares, and they have different like kind of squares inside of them that are either like one color or another color. And your goal is to arrange them in a way that you can clear other types of squares and rectangles. So it's similar to Tetris in that way. But the big change compared to something like Tetris is that it's also kind of like a rhythm game in a sense. So kind of similar to Tetris Effect, like as you go through the stages, the music changes, and you have this bar going across the top of the screen called, I think it's called the BPM bar. And as it goes across the screen in pace with the music, it will erase any squares that you've managed to align. So it's this really addicting rhythm of dropping blocks, trying to create, grids that can be erased, and then trying to chain them in a way so that when the line comes across, you can rack up these massive combos. And it's also just, it's like sessions of this game are fairly lengthy. Like, I'll pick it up and I'll start playing, on level 1, and it takes a good 30, 40 minutes for me to get through just a round of this game before I inevitably fail and reach the top. So it's got a great rhythm. I really am enjoying it.
Yeah, I think I'm just watching a gameplay reel right now, and I feel mesmerized by all the effects. I don't know how it actually works, but it feels like you can have a really nice time when you get in the flow of the game, right?
Yeah, like you said,
Yeah.
It has very Tetris Effect vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. And so this is actually a remaster of what was originally a PSP game. So that it's kind of weird in that sense. We haven't gotten a new Lumens game in quite some time. So, but yeah, it's on sale right now. So if anyone's curious about it, I'd highly recommend it. And just really quickly, another game I wanted to shout out that I've always wanted to play and finally got around to it this past week was via Switch Online. I played the original Sin and Punishment for Nintendo 64. Man, what a roller coaster that game is. I don't know if you folks have played it, but the story in this game is just completely bonkers. I honestly would struggle to summarize what happens in this game.
I think the game is in English in the 64 in the Switch Online version.
Well, so originally when Sin and Punishment was released back in Japan, it was only released in Japan, but it had English voice acting even back then.
Huh,
so
okay.
Yeah, so really strange release. It was weird that we never got it. Have you guys played the original Sin and Punishment?
No,
I had interested, but I never played it.
Yeah, same. I've heard a lot
Okay.
about the Wii game, Sin Punishment Star Successor,
Yeah,
I think
me
is what it was
too, me
called.
too.
And I've never played that one either, but they're on the list of stuff I'd like to try out one day.
All right, well then let me just kind of quickly sum up some of the incredibly just strange but also amazing things about this game. First of all, compared to other N64 games visually, this game is very impressive. It was very impressive for its time. There really is not much else like it on the N64. It's in some ways it was doing the things that NER Automata was doing before it was. I mean, this game shifts between you kind of running towards the screen and, shooting at enemies that way. Then sometimes it's a side scroller. Sometimes you're kind of orbiting around enemies. So it was playing with different types of perspective in this type of fast-paced combat action game well before other games were doing it. It's also just, from a story perspective, it's so strange. It's the perfect example of the kind of game where you boot it up and you just have no idea what's going on, but you pick up enough of it that it's compelling. Basically what I was able to pick up from this game is you're in the super far future and there's this huge famine going on, and so science has gotten to the point where they were able to breed these new types of creatures, basically to be slaughtered to feed people to try and end this famine. But they managed to all basically escape and start fighting and destroying the entire human race. So Tokyo is basically an apocalyptic wasteland at the start of this game. And so you're fighting these creatures and you're also fighting other humans. And so that's all bonkers. And then it gets even more strange with one of this characters turns into this giant mech at one point, and there's something about you see your daughter 10 years in the future. It's all just wild. There's time travel, there's mutations, and yeah. I don't want to spoil the final.
Japanese sci-fi.
Yeah, it's wild. I really want to talk about the final boss, but I don't know. I don't know if that's okay or not. This game did come out a long time ago.
it really made me interested in that game. I had a friend which is a gigantic fan of the franchise, and he dreams to see a new one. And I always asked him if, because looking at the gameplay, I always asked him if it was similar to Kid Icarus, and he said that not quite, not exactly like Kid Icarus on the 3DS, even though there are some on rails passages and stuff like that. But it feels like this game is actually all the time on rails almost, right? You don't have full control of the character, and there's all this crazy stuff happening on the screen, and you have to keep shooting, like a classic shooter.
Yes. Yeah, I think a rail shooter is fairly accurate in the sense that like you do have some level of control, but it's mostly moving around within a portion of the screen. Like that does change
Right.
sometimes, but yeah, for the most part, that's what you're doing. And it's a very short game too. I beat it in about 2 hours, so it's not the kind of thing that's going to suck up a lot of time. Yeah. So I'd recommend it. If you're looking for a piece of like cool Nintendo history that's like surprisingly dark and like it's not the type of game I could see them making today, I'd recommend it.
I think I'll give it a try, yeah.
Yeah, if you do, I'd love to hear what you think, especially about the controls, because the controls have not aged as well as some of the other parts of this game. All right, folks.
I can see that, yeah.
Well, that is our show for the week. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in and listening. This has been episode 39 of Nintendo Everything Refresh. We hope you all are having a great year, and we thank you all for listening to our show. If you like the show, please spread the word. Please tell your friends. Share it out on social media. We are on all of the social media. We are on all of the audio streaming platforms. So whether you listen over on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, we are pretty much everywhere. So please spread the word, tell your friends. Also, if you want to go and rate us on Spotify, that would be a huge help with their algorithm and helping us get our show out. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this week. We'll be back at you next week with everything new and exciting in the world of Nintendo. See you guys later.